Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Another History of the World. Today we're going to be talking about the story of Abina Mansah. Picture a courtroom, late 19th century British Gold Coast colony in present-day Ghana, Africa, at the onset of colonialism. A room full of important men, a British judge, two Euro-African attorneys, a wealthy African country gentleman, and a jury of local leaders, and a woman, persuading them that her rights matter. This comes from an 1876 court transcript and a story retold in a graphic history book of microhistory called Abina and the Important Men by Trevor Getz and Liz Clarke. This is the story of Abina Mansah, a woman without history who was wrongfully enslaved, escaped to the British-controlled territory, and then took her former master to court. Mansah contended that she was wrongfully enslaved by a wealthy planter, Kamina Edu. By 1876, slavery was still flourishing under British control, as the region's economic system was built on the production of so-called legitimate products like palm oil. Although slavery was abolished in 1834 in the colonies, it didn't affect the condition of wives or concubines, so slave owners would import women as slaves and pass them off as members of the household or as wives. And Mansah was one of these women, and Edu placed Mansah under the charge of his sister Ekoa, who put her to work alongside other slave girls. Edu eventually gave Mansah to a male member of his extended family as a wife, but Mansah ran away to the town of Cape Coast, and there she befriended a Euro-African, James Davis, who was working as a court interpreter and acted as Mansah's legal counsel. Much of the court transcript makes it clear that the trial was about Mansah's slave status, with Edu's counsel arguing that Mansah was not a slave but a free worker. Although owned by an important man, the management of slave labour was largely in the control of free-born women, though. So there are important historical lessons for us here. Firstly, when it comes to defining gender, traditional Western ideas of labour divisions break down. In Europe, women couldn't access occupations, but would have worked elsewhere. But in African societies, the division was between productive labour and reproductive labour. In the aftermath of the slave trade, unlike men, who were valued by Europeans as productive labour, women were valued in African societies for their reproductive labour, as well as their productive labour, because agricultural production was largely carried out by women. Even then, slavery was the basis of society, and enslaved women did the work that free women normally performed. And social structures differ too, both in terms of marriage and slavery. Slavery is often defined as a property relationship, involuntariness, having a marginal position in society, or being subject to the control of another. But in Africa, a broader definition is necessary because there were differences in status and treatment of different classes of enslaved women, whether they'd been acquired through the market or born within the household. And our definition must also include domestic slavery, which could sometimes be the basis for various types of marriage or concubinage, which is normally unexplained by Western conceptions. So this hierarchy meant that even if the labour was easier than agricultural labour, women, enslaved or not, were still vulnerable to abuses. And so it's been argued that there's an intersection between gender and slavery of intra- and extrafamilial stratification in this society. Women were married and made slaves to various people, and their experiences were varied. Women were enslaved because it was easier to assimilate them, and they had specific reproductive functions justified by female inferiority, which assisted in the transmission of ideological patterns as well. So the idea of women as controllers of slave labour has long been ignored, with historians sort of reluctant to interrogate the romantic view of an egalitarian Africa. Scholars have placed importance on class over gender and taken a male-centred approach that means women are often passive participants in slavery. Abina Mansah's story is unique. Marriage disputes were not often taken up in British courts, and customary courts were also inaccessible. By arguing that Mansah should be recognised as married, She was trying to protect her safety and to receive the respect accrued to married women. Although unsuccessful in a legal case, Mansah was a conscious agent of history making, having her voice heard and recorded in the language of the court, which was rare amongst most testimonies of former slaves in this time and place. The court transcript itself is only a transliteration of what Mansah actually said, so reconstructing and reinterpreting her voice from the transcript comes with its own problems. But reading into the so-called silences of history, like in Abina Mansah's story, provides a valuable and rarely seen perspective of history. In other words, another history.